Living sustainably isn't just about how we live, it's also about how we leave. While we focus on reducing waste and conserving energy and life, we often overlook the environmental impact of our final footprint. Fortunately, green burial options and legacy giving offer meaningful ways to ensure our values endure. Thank you for joining us today for a discussion on end of life choices and how we can leave behind more than just memories. We will begin by asking Andy Pellin, Living Green Berries Executive Director, to share our land acknowledgement with you.
Living Green Berries committed to honoring and respecting the lands that we occupy. Barrie is situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe people, which include the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. These lands are the home of many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people who care for them. Living Green will work humbly alongside Indigenous peoples, seeking guidance and respecting cultures and traditions so that we might help repair some of the ongoing impacts of colonialism on this land and its people. Living Green, if you haven't heard of us before, which I suspect you have, we've been around since 1991. We have been the passion of many people who care about making our community better. Basically, if there's been a green initiative over the past 3 decades in Barrie, we likely started it or were part of it. Plastic recycling, household energy and water conservation, garbage cleanups, community gardens, these were all started by Living Green and their passionate volunteers. But of all the initiatives that we could focus our scant resources on, today we know that the most critical issue of our time is climate change. We want everyone to engage with this issue and start to take action. We believe that our city can be a better place to live if people are engaged in green solutions, which is why we do what we do. We want people to join us because they believe in the promise of a better future and that they see that being green is smart, progressive, and practical. So what we want to do is we want to tie as many of our actions to and our messaging, our events, programs, to things that are available right here, right now in the Greater Barrie area in 2025. Obviously, it's great to know about some wonderful green initiative happening in Sweden, but we want to know what we can do here in Barrie in this time. So in fact, this exact webinar was born out of Carrie and I seeing all these really cool green burial things on social media, like mycology pods or like mushroom pods or human composting. And then we thought, could you even do that here? And this is what we're here today to talk about. What can we do here and now in this time? So how we do our big thing is we have this monthly plan. So every month we take a different theme around climate action, and then we try and have some kind of engaging content, whether it's a webinar or an in-person event or a physical event where people are actually getting their hands dirty. And we'd use that as a way to try and connect up people with these actions, and then we'll repeat it again year after year in those months. So in the winter, our first part of our year, we have our first 3 actions, which are be hopeful, invest in green, and reduce waste. Be hopeful is really important one, just in context of climate change and making sure that we understand that positivity is always a better way to go. This month, February, is investing in green, how you spend your money and what you're thinking about this way, which is what we're doing today with this webinar. And then next month, we will focus on waste reduction. We'll have our repair cafes. Then once we start getting into spring, we get extremely busy because our 3 months there are naturalize, plant trees, and to tread lightly. So naturalizing, this is around Earth Day. We will be having some more content about how to get your lawn off grass a little bit. We will have our annual tree and shrub sale, which is all native species with our partner organization, Pollinate Barrie. We have multiple tree planting events, so please go check our website and make sure you sign up if you're interested in joining us, because we have a goal to plant 10,000 trees in Barrie. We are over halfway to that goal, and when it's done, we'll probably start again. But right now, we also, in June, for Tread Lightly, how you move around in your environment, we have done webinars on electric vehicles. This year, we're focused on bicycles and using bicycles as a transportation method. And we're going to have a really fun, engaging event called the Barrie Bicycle Poker Ride, where you go around to different businesses in Barrie, collect poker, playing cards, and then whoever has the best hand at the end will win some really awesome prizes. In the summer, we start to look at engaging, how you actually connect with the environment and make sure that your leaders know. And again, today is voting day. Make sure you vote for the environment. We also look at powering down. We held last summer a Solar 101 webinar that's going to be posted on our website. So if you want to go check that one out, you can. And then we start gearing up for our annual fundraising event called the Gala in the Woods. We've done it for the last 2 years. It is a fantastic event, and we are looking forward to doing it again on the 20th of September. Then once autumn hits this year, we'll be back into planting more trees, because that's when trees want to be planted, when they're asleep. So we'll be doing more. We plant them around Halloween, which is a lot of fun. And then, of course, we switch gears in November, December to the Christmas season, and trying to give people some better consumer options on how they spend their money. Today, we are here to talk to some experts about living green and dying green. I want to introduce our first speaker, Amanda Kelly. She is the co-founder of Awake, a company formed in Oro-Medonte that is trying to make greener burial options accessible for more Canadians while helping cemeteries to continue to operate. Amanda is a lifelong learner of science and nature. She began her career as a librarian and holds a master's in information science and undergrad in technology and culture from Western University. Growing up, the Dundas Valley Conservation Area played a significant role in her life. After an accident in 2019 landed her in the hospital, she began a spiritual journey that led her to ordainment as a metaphysical minister. She studied many faiths, customs, and traditions, and recently received her license as a funeral planner with the Bereavement Authority of Ontario. Join me in welcoming Amanda.
Thank you so much, Andy, for introducing me. Like you said, my name is Amanda. I founded Awake after significant personal losses in my life that led me to think really, really deeply about what a happy ending would, could, or should look like, both for my loved ones and then also what I wanted for myself. I've now spent 4 years studying end-of-life options and burial practices across Canada, also looking beyond that into other countries around the world. And I wanted to note at the beginning that, to me, the approach that I take to this topic is very holistic and inclusive. I think this is a very personal decision in all of our lives, perhaps one of the most important decisions in our lives. And coming at it from a very open-minded place and then narrowing down to what is the best fit for you and the best fit for your family is kind of the lens that we're going to take here today. So like Andy mentioned, I do have a licensing with the Bereavement Authority of Ontario. It's as a funeral planner, which basically means that I've studied all the regulations and the legislation surrounding our burial, end of life, and funeral practices in Ontario. I have also had the privilege of performing as a celebrations of life for a few individuals that have been very humbling experiences. Now I work with cemeteries all across Canada to help them create sustainable, eco-friendly resting places. So that's a little bit about me. I have a few questions for you that I'd like you to think about as we go through our discussion today, and then also to take with you into your conversations with friends and family and just the quiet moments with yourself after today. So here's what some of them are. Where is your forever? Do you actually know what your options are that could get you to your place forever? What are some different factors that you should consider when making this decision? How can you be prepared for that? And then I'll share a couple questions that we receive as frequently asked questions that perhaps might resonate with you that we could bring up later in the Q&A section at the end. So the first thing to think about, where do you want to be forever? There are a lot of factors in this decision and this thought process: psychological ones, like where you feel good, spiritual ones, practical considerations. And there's always also individuals who simply say, really, I don't care. I don't really care where I'm going to be. I won't be here. And I just want to note, even if that is your preference, which is totally valid and great, even if that's your preference, it's still a preference that needs to be noted, and it needs to be known and shared with your next of kin who are going to be responsible for your decisions at the end of your life. So keep this in the back of your mind. Where is your happy place, or where do you want to be if you could choose anywhere in the world? Now, when the time comes, so these are some of the things that I suggest you think about. What makes you feel at peace? Where or how do you want to be remembered? Is there something that might be meaningful for your family when they are remembering you? Perhaps there's someone, a person, a pet, a spouse, a friend who you'd like to be laid to rest with. These are all things that you can take into consideration, which is kind of a bigger picture perspective than simply going into a funeral home and making a pre-plan where we're just talking about the practical decisions. These are some of the big holistic questions that you really should come into those transactions and those conversations already having an idea about. Okay, so the topic of disposition. So when we're at the end of our lives, our family members are going to be asked, what disposition will you be choosing for the body? And at once, this question basically meant, are you choosing burial or are you choosing cremation? And until fairly recently, those were really the only options. And factors in that decision were largely either personal preference or religious practice. But now, as a very enlightened and also green aware community here that we're moving with today, there are some other aspects that we can consider as well in this discussion and this decision. So we're going to look really briefly, high level, at each of these 4 different options listed here: burial, traditional versus natural, cremation, alkaline hydrolysis, also known as aquamation, and then human composting, because there's tons of questions about that, tons of news from the States. Not currently legal in Canada, although that may change in many of our lifetimes. So the first, burial. So traditional burial, as we think of it, often uses elements like embalming fluids, lacquered caskets, metal caskets, concrete grave liners that are poured in order to make individual graves have capacity for multiple family members. So traditional burials, as many of us in North America think of them, are not considered to be green. On the flip side of that, natural or green burials, which natural and green burial terminology is used differently, but they are very similar in practice. So the comparison is that as an alternative to many of those materials, they are using biodegradable materials, organic materials. They're caring for the body in an unembalmed way, and they are minimizing the environmental impact of putting our body into the earth in order to help with decomposition. Here are some things for you to think about if you think that burial, either method, might be a fit for you. So location, if cemetery proximity is important to you, look at where some green options may be available. There are dedicated green cemeteries. They're probably a further drive because they're not everywhere in Ontario, but they do exist. There's also cemeteries that have simply sections in them where there's sections that are traditional and sections that are greener. You can also ask them questions about when it comes to actually maintaining and caring for that cemetery, what are some of their practices? Because some will go so far as having completely unmowed natural meadowlands, whereas some will allow a green burial in a more traditional manicured space. Other thing to consider, so when we look at how our bodies are returned to earth for natural burial, a very common question or decision is between casket versus shroud. Caskets, beautiful caskets, can be handmade by wood, handmade by wicker, using all biodegradable materials. A shroud is another option that is very popular and should be noted is the traditional option for other cultures, including in Judaism and in Islam faiths. They've been using burial shrouds for millennia made of natural cotton fibers. We have these options now. If you're thinking about some of these, it's worth a discussion. Looking at cost points. Sometimes green burials can be a little bit more affordable than traditional burials, particularly if you compare to family members who may have chosen really, really high-end caskets. Sometimes they can be comparable to a traditional burial or traditional funeral. In either case, really recommend preparing your family, having this discussion with them, just so that when the funeral or the burial time comes, they are prepared for the service itself, and they don't have an expectation that one thing will be seen or a grief will happen. Grief will be conducted, the service will be conducted in a particular way when it goes another way. All right, on to cremation. So cremation is the reduction or incineration of our body by flame. There are a few things to consider. Cremation is also by far the most popular disposition option in Canada. So 75% of us here in Canada do ultimately choose cremation. And there are a number of different factors. Cost is certainly one. Cremation is the most affordable solution on the market currently when it comes to disposition for our bodies. But other factors include land use. By decreasing the size of our remains at end of life, we significantly reduce the amount of land that cemeteries require to take up. If everyone in Canada were to choose a full body burial, whether that's natural or traditional full body burial, our country would require 77 acres annually of burial land for Canadians. Because 75% of us choose cremation, that rate is significantly reduced. So other factors to consider, people talk a lot about what is the energy consumption in cremation and what are the emissions created in cremation. And we do have some references and facts for that. So the emissions created during a single cremation are equivalent to the emissions of 2,000 kilometers of driving in your car. The fuel consumption used for a single cremation is equivalent to approximately 28 gallons. So it's about the tank of an average SUV of gas. Another factor with cremation that I think a lot of families resonate with, it gives us a lot of freedom when it comes to memorialization because we have a lot more time to process and think really intentionally about how and where and when we would like to lay our loved one to rest and would like to honor them. Okay, so that brings us to aquamation. Aquamation is the newest kid to the class, so many of you may not be familiar with it. Aquamation is an alternative to cremation. It uses water, alkali, heat, and pressure to reduce our bodies, to break down our bodies. Families at the end of an aquamation process do receive an urn, similarly to with cremation, although they're not technically ashes, but they're powdered bone that's received. A few things to consider if you are interested in aquamation. So because they're a newer option, they are not as common across our province. There's between 5 to 10, I've read a few different reports, between 5 to 10 aquamation facilities available in Ontario. Worth noting that many of your local funeral homes will still work with these aquamation facilities. They'll simply be arranging transportation to and from them on your behalf. Energy consumption. So energy consumption in aquamation is significantly less than in cremation as an alternative. They do, however, use and consume water, and treatment of that water is different in different municipalities. Sometimes it is in the public water treatment system. Sometimes it is separate and it is sold to agricultural land and farmers who can use it for their crops. So if you're considering this option, you can ask if you have a preference for this, you can ask about the water. Cost for aquamation is typically a little bit more than cremation, but it is still an affordable option. And then similarly, because your family has an urn, there are a lot of memorial options that are available to you. All right, which brings us to human composting, which despite being a huge topic, this is like a really in a nutshell section here, because the number one thing is human composting is not available in Canada currently. There is talk that that could change in the near-ish future. And I do know that the province has been investigating some of the pros and cons and concerns when it comes to health, when it comes to equipment and processes and practices. So they are actively looking into it, but it is currently not available to us, even though many may find it interesting. Lots of funeral homes and cemeteries get asked about it. So I wanted to make this clear. So human composting uses microbes, plant materials, and temperature regulation to break down our body basically in a pod. This process takes 60 to 90 days total. Large fragments of bone do remain, and they're typically ground into a powder that's added at the end to the end product. The end product looks very much like a mulch. So you do end up as a family with a cubic yard mulch, which can be a difficult situation to figure out what you want to do with. Some places have programs with cemeteries in the States. Some have programs with parks, state parks and things, or they did. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. All right, so when it comes to my particular area of expertise, where I started to want to make an impact in Canadians' lives was because 75% of Canadians choose cremation. I wanted to make sure that those Canadians had a green option on the market because I think it's only right. So my area of expertise is in ashes to earth. We have a patented soil product that turns cremated remains into organic earth. And that allows a few different things. So we have cemeteries across Canada who we are creating memorial garden spaces with. This one here is pictured with City of Hamilton. We're also creating some really cool memorial forests. They're less common currently, but more we will see in the next year, 2 years. I promise we will make that happen. We also are just launching a new pilot project with a handful of funeral homes for at-home planting kits. So families that have ashes at home or would want to plant ashes at a cottage or somewhere in nature are able to do that. And that partnership is through Reynolds Funeral Home, which is just in Bracebridge. All right, so as a quick summary, some things for you to consider when you walk out of this conversation. Think a bit about what your beliefs are because you have options. So think about what your beliefs are, what feels and sits right with you. Think about if your family would have any preferences or traditions, if that matters to you, if it matters a lot, if it matters a little bit. Sometimes families like to have somewhere to visit. Sometimes they like to have just like an artifact or a symbolic item at home, and that is enough of a memorial for them. Cost is, of course, an important factor. When you pre-plan your final arrangements with a funeral home, you're able to lock in the costs at today's rate rather than pay the price of inflation in the future. They take the funds and they invest them so that when the time comes, you have everything you need covered. So in terms of things on your personal side to be prepared for whatever decision it is that you make, even if it feels difficult to talk about it, it's really important to share what your final wishes are with family and friends. Some people simply think that putting it into their will is adequate. Putting it in your will is great, or your power of attorney is great. However, we all know legal processes take time, and there are definitely situations where people have put their final wishes in their will only to find out that their mom has already been cremated or already been buried and it's too late. So talking about it or putting it in a separate written document that can be accessible immediately by your next of kin is very helpful. And then, like I mentioned earlier, pre-planning with the funeral home has a lot of benefits as well to just have those decisions put in place before it's an emergency. Great. So if you had any questions, please make sure to note them down so we can discuss them in the Q&A later. A couple of the frequently asked questions that I've received in the past that may perk a little bit of interest that you can just let percolate. I want to be a tree when I die. How is that possible? My mom would really like to be at the cottage. Can we do that for her? I had someone tell me, I'm afraid of the dark. So is this my only option, or is there other options that are maybe less scary for me? I really want to be with my dog. How can I be with my dog? And then what if I already have a family plot? Is there a way to keep the family plot and make it greener, or do I have other options? So that is the summary of my segment today. I'm looking forward to discussing your questions in a little bit.
Thank you, Amanda. Now, please join Andy and I as we welcome Jackie Ramler.
Now, Jackie has been a dedicated leader in the financial industry since 1995. She is on the board of directors for the Responsible Investment Association of Canada, and she uses her degrees in environmental and political science to screen portfolios that are aligned with her principles. Jackie is a big supporter of several local charities, including Living Green, and I will say is someone I consider ethical and smart, a friend whose advice I regularly turn to help create the kind of future that I would like to see. So I will hand it over to Jackie.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate that. And you're a pleasure to work with too. The whole Living Green board was on that for a few years, and it's exciting to see everything that's going on with the organization. So I've spoken many times on green investing, and we thought we would do something different. And I love this. Amanda, that was incredible. It was so insightful, and I jotted down my notes, and I'll be doing a document. So thank you for that guidance. So charitable giving is oftentimes associated with end-of-life planning. And so we thought it would be sort of a good dovetail to the options that you have available. Not only do you want to have the final arrangements of your choice, but you oftentimes might want to make a difference in organizations that mean a lot to you and that align with your values. And I apologize, something's going on. There we go. So we're going to cover this high level, not going into a lot of the weeds. And certainly as before, jot down your questions and we'll certainly cover them at the end. You know, Canadians are incredibly generous, and that makes me so proud. I'm a Canadian by choice. I was not born here. I immigrated 30 years ago, and I can't say that I would be anywhere else by choice either. I'm so happy I'm in Canada. So in terms of giving, you have a few choices. You can give now. And a lot of people give money regularly each year. You know, as I said, Canadians, I think it's like 84% of Canadians give on a regular basis. How cool is that? The other option is a lot of people will wait and just bequest money in their estate through their will, or they'll set up a trust. And really, there's the third option, which is sort of a blend, and that's where a charitable trust or a donor-advised fund can really make a lot of sense for some people. In terms of giving money now, what are our options? So most people, you know, give a donation of cash, $25 or more will get you a receipt. But I'm going to show you later the impact tax-wise. You know, it's not that you want to never give money just for tax savings. Obviously, it's got to be from the heart. It's what you can afford, and never feel like you're forced or that you have to give more just because of tax either. But it's good to know the difference if you have a choice. Now, for a lot of clients, what we do every fall is that we do donation of securities in kind. And what does in kind mean? So for example, if they've owned Apple for 20, 30 years, they've made a lot of money on that. And if it's not in a sheltered, registered account like an RSP or tax-free savings account, then there is a huge taxable benefit that, or taxable, not a benefit, a taxes owing if they were to dispose of that security. So what they do is by donating in kind, they don't have to pay the capital gains on that position. Now, there's also advantages if you have a holding company or a company structure, is that you can do a tax receipt issued at fair market value if you're giving something. You know, this is where you'll see businesses give property, or, you know, they might have business decisions to make, and it might make more sense tax-wise to give it to donate a property to a charity versus to sell it and deal with capital gains issues. So there's a lot of things at play here. And again, we want to keep it fairly high level. But what we oftentimes work with clients is setting up a charitable giving fund. Now, why would people do that? Why would they take any other money? Well, there's a few different reasons. We have many clients that chose not to have children or were unable to have children. They might have nieces and nephews that they'll help along the way, but really they don't have the family members or their family's doing fine. And so they want to make an impact on the community. And so a charitable giving fund, by setting that up, can not only help them now and through the years, it can also help reduce taxes in a state. So it's really a planning choice. And again, it's when people have more funds than what they need access to. In terms of how it works, it is, so again, another term for it might be a donor advised fund. It's an irrevocable trust established for charitable giving purposes. And it's very flexible because as the donor, you still direct where the money goes. You can still manage the account with the help of your advisor. Can be set up either personally or by a corporation. And again, you're still in the driver's seat. You choose which organizations and when you want to support and how much you're giving each year. We have one couple that we work with. They're delightful. They're the sweetest couple. And they give to about 10 charities each year. And it is a bit of an administrative nightmare because every charity, some are through Canada Helps, others are through their website, others are through different portals. And so it becomes a bit onerous when we're trying to manage 10 different charities, 10 different amounts, and 10 different securities. When we go through and set up a charitable trust, the administration takes care of all that. All we do is give direction. So some of the benefits of a charitable trust is you can use a donation over several years. So for example, oftentimes, last year we had a client who put $120,000 into a charitable trust. Did she make over $120,000? No. So I worked closely with her accountant. We determined then how much was an optimum amount to put in and to ensure that she would get the tax benefit over the next 5 years. So again, the advantage is that you can donate shares in kind, so you don't have that capital gains, but you get the tax benefit for many years to come. You can name your trust. So there's a lot of flexibility with an option like this. And again, is it for everybody? No. But if you're in that situation or you know of somebody that's in that situation where they do have that ability, it can be an incredible solution. Personally, and I've told my husband and son this, I'm putting a chunk of money into something like this because I want to make a lasting difference in my community. So we thought it would be helpful as well, just to give you an overview of what the tax looks like. Now, this might not be your situation, but again, it's sort of an overview of whether you sold something to donate versus if you donated something in kind. So this is looking at selling securities and donating the cash proceeds or donating the securities. And there's a benefit to donating the securities in this case of about just under $14,000. And if we note, it's because that was the tax on the gain. So that's really what we're eliminating by donating shares or securities versus selling something to raise the cash to do it. So again, you might not be in this situation now. So I'm going to paint you an idea because what we are is we help our clients with solutions. For example, sale of a property. I have a client that is been the family farm was very much central to their livelihood and their belief system. And the two brothers and the mother, before she passed away, were committed to keeping that property as a farm as long as possible. Unfortunately, it's within town limits, and it's virtually impossible to fight the city against that. It can be taken over. It can be expropriated. You know, there's a lot of things that sort of you don't always have control over. So they're looking at if they choose to sell this property, it will be a very large tax burden, several $1,000,000. And so I planted the seed when we were talking about this, and I said, well, you can either write a check to CRA, or we could set up a charitable trust, and you would have the ability to pass this money to charities that you choose to offset that tax. That perked his interest. He was excited to hear that he had an option other than just paying a big tax bill. Again, I had mentioned earlier, many of my clients, they either, you know, let's face it, wealth is simple. You spend less than what you make, you save it, you invest it wisely, and you don't buy a lot of stuff that's useless. That's really the secret to wealth. So if you're in the enviable position where you've done well and you still live below your means, then you could have a sizable estate. And again, pre-planning, we can help clients help to understand what the taxes in their estate would be. We have a worksheet that I'll show you shortly. Now, the third situation is if you're in a high income situation. And again, if you have the habits of the wealthy where you don't spend all of your income and you're not chasing the stuff, then that high income, you know, you're usually paying a higher tax rate. And again, you might as well, if you believe in really building up the organizations in the community, the charities that can help create the world you want to see in the future, then charitable donations can be effective tax strategy to help reduce that tax, but also do good in your community. So I mentioned I've developed an estate planning tool with my clients, and this is just an example. We've taken out any account numbers or any personal data, but this is just looking at the tax liabilities on estate. So first, there's the capital gains, or in the case of a RIF, that's 100% income. So in this estate that is just under 3 million, there's about 130,000 in capital gains. And unless it's structured properly, there's probate of about 35,000. So we're looking at solutions on how this client could reduce this tax burden. This was their solution. Now, actually, it's more than a solution. They really want to give the majority of their wealth to charities. So this is going to wipe out all the tax in this particular situation. These are who they're giving their money to. And I don't know if you noticed, but number 3 is up there. My favorite charity. And so there are ways to work through the process, and this is what we do to support clients. So again, you know, I'm not here to sell you anything. I know that this is really just oftentimes new information. If you have a situation or know somebody and they just want to sort of kick around some ideas, I'm happy to spend time with people. So I give a complimentary 30-minute review. It can be in person, over Zoom, or phone call, whatever they choose, but just something that I put out there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jackie. We have a question for Amanda. Amanda, on your website, it says ashes are not biodegradable or compostable. What happens then to all of the ashes that have been spread thus far, whether it is at the cottage or in a lake? What type of impact is this making on the environment?
So this is one of my favorite types of conversations to get into because it's both science and it's personal, it's spiritual, it's infinitely personal. So I think it's important that we address both of those sides. So that is correct. Ashes do not, and we call them ashes. So cremation ashes are actually cremated remains. From a chemistry standpoint, they are not ashes. They're not anything like ashes. We attributed this word to them simply because they happen to resemble ashes. That photo that I showed on the cremation slide in my presentation are real cremated remains. They're a friend of mine's father, and that's what they look like. So cremation ashes do not biodegrade or compost. They have been reduced so far from the organic material that they started as that they are no longer organic. They've also been removed of any and all natural bacteria and anything that would help the environment to work them in. They have a very high pH level. The pH of ashes is 11.8, which is compared to bleach, which is 12. So, and they're also like almost pure salt. They're two cups of each of our urns is salt. So on their own, they do not biodegrade. They do not work into the soil, and they do not provide nutrients to plants. Unfortunately, the high sodium component chronically dehydrates the plants in the places that they've been spread. They kind of latch onto the root systems and they prevent the roots from absorbing other nutrients that they need to grow. Depending on how the spreading has been done, if it's more like on the surface, then they will likely blow away. If the ashes themselves have been more buried in a concentrated form, they will remain that way for millennia. So there's some really cool archaeologists who've studied not particularly the subject, but when they have done excavations at historical sites like over 10,000 years ago, they have found cremated remains still completely intact. While the remains themselves stay intact, however, many of these toxic properties leach into the environment around them. So they do affect the plant life in the entire surrounding area. We typically measure out even like a few meters from a site. So yeah, they don't have a positive impact on the environment. I can't speak to water specifically because very few studies in the world have been done on the effect of cremated remains in water. And it's something I'm very interested in. Many folks, water is very peaceful. It lowers our blood pressure. Many folks want to be laid to rest in water. So I think it's something that we need to consciously study. What I can say is that the reason we started doing what we do is because our soil blend, which we now have patented, treats 22 of those biochemical factors of the cremated remains so that they can neutralize the toxicity and that the minerals and nutrients that are in them from our bone matter, there's lots of calcium and magnesium and things available. It's just way too much and it's not accessible to the plants. So we treat the toxicity, and then we use particular bacteria to slowly release those nutrients so that they can be like a timed release fertilizer, and that the trees or the plants in the garden can actually access them in the amount and the timing that they need. So I hope that helps to answer your question. It's very nuanced, I know, but at the end of the day, we all, especially those of us who want to be in nature, we want to make sure that being in nature has a positive impact. So I hope that was thorough for you.
Thank you, Amanda. Now we have a question for Jackie. Jackie, are there specific questions we should ask our financial planner to help kick off the conversation?
Well, I think around charitable contributions, yes, your advisor can sort of help you. Once we get into bigger, like if in the case of this farm and of several million in tax liability, then we work closely with the client and the accountant. But certainly just checking in with your advisor in terms of your optimum charitable donation. Now there again, doesn't mean that you have to do that amount, but it gives you an idea of in terms of the tax savings. One of the things to note is that anything under $200 in donations is a much lower percentage than over $200. So just something to keep in mind. If you're going to donate $190, might as well go up another 10, right? And just because you get a better tax break on that donation.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jackie. This question is for Amanda. Amanda, info about next steps after I've thought about my preferences. Who do I call to take action? What are the differences between you, funeral homes, cemeteries, and other industry partners?
Sure, yeah. So in terms of next steps, I actually work directly with cemeteries and funeral homes. So I don't typically work one-on-one with families. So I definitely suggest if you already working or have met with a funeral home, ask them what green options that they have available. If you already have a particular cemetery like set in your sights where you think that would be such a lovely place to be, call them, ask them if they have green options available. If you're starting from scratch and you want to see who has the options that best reflect your vision, do an internet search. The Natural Burial Association of Canada is a really great place to start. There's also a Green Burial Council. They are also a great place to start. Both of these folks list on their websites cemeteries that have designated green areas. In terms of funeral homes that actually are giving you green options for caring for your body and also for the products, like whether it's casket, shroud, etc., there are ones that specialize in this type of thing. So there's one that I work with called Eco Funerals in Mississauga. There's another one that I work with in more south in St. Catharines called Essentials Cremation. And then Reynolds Funeral Home, who I mentioned earlier, who are in Bracebridge, they're specifically going to be stocking our planting kits as part of an early pilot that we're doing. So yeah, but the best place to start as a consumer or as a family is with those public facing folks. The funeral home, if you're going to go the route of cremation, is the best starting point.
We have another question and a comment for Amanda. Amanda, could you please give a similar assessment of the impact of aquamation? And the comment that goes with this is Mary. Mary has been trying to assess the cumulative carbon footprint of the options available to a resident of Barrie, including transportation and etc. Green burials in Guelph versus cremation versus aquamation. So if you have any comments that you would like to add to that, Amanda, that would be helpful.
So I actually earlier was on this website called Open CO2, and it allows you to put in, and perhaps you're already doing this, Mary, but it allows you to put in certain amounts of carbon dioxide, and it'll translate it for you into like how many kilometers in your car that equals gasoline, et cetera, et cetera. And that has helped me to actually get some real numbers when comparing the different disposition options in particular. So I guess, yeah, okay, transportation, green burial in Guelph. So there's a phenomenal cemetery in Guelph that specializes in green burial. There's another one in Niagara. There's one in Cobourg. There's discussion of one coming online in further up north in Muskoka somewhere, but it is not online at this point. So depending, it's a personal decision. So we can use math to inform our decisions. We can use the math of carbon emissions and of fuel consumption. But at the end of the day, the way that you personally weigh each of those numbers, some people may scale the value of one factor higher than another, right? So I always just say to think about your own personal decisions. Like if water consumption is important to you, that'll influence your factor. If land conservation or healthy soil is important to you, that'll influence your decision. So I'm sorry it's not a black or white answer, but I really appreciate that you're doing the legwork to dive into it. And I do hope that you are also talking to your family about what your ultimate choice may be.
Next question is for Amanda. Amanda, if you're doing a burial with a shroud, is that the same as human composting? And how long does it take a body to return to the earth in a burial using a shroud or plain wood coffin?
So burial in a shroud or a natural casket is not considered human composting, although a decomposition process will be happening below the surface of the earth. But human composting is actually done in a completely separate facility in like pod type systems. And then the final product is what's given to the family or given to the cemetery. So in terms of length of time, I actually don't know. I will say though, as a soil scientist, there are some factors to take into account. So how long a body takes to decompose is going to depend on the average temperature of where they're buried, and the average rainfall and moisture content. Higher moisture content, higher temperatures, faster decomposition. Okay, so about 5 years for our soft tissues to break down. there are not that many natural burials who have been exhumed over time, so we don't know exactly in terms of bone matter, but typically our large bones in our bodies can take much, much longer to decompose. I think sometimes it can be decades.
Amanda, Ginger would like to know what the answers are to the frequently asked questions that you get.
There were a few of them. My mom wants to be at the cottage. What can we do for her? In that situation, you can do a water scattering in the water at the cottage. I don't recommend it because of the environmental impact and because of the fact that we haven't studied this, and I assume we want to take care of our land at the cottage. You can do plantings in the garden, or like using one of our planting kits, or on your own, though like I said, the health of that plant is going to decrease over time. If you're wanting to lay someone to rest in a personal space, like a cottage, like your backyard, your best choice for disposition is going to be either aquamation or cremation, because you're able to take those remains home and do what you would like with them. One of the reasons we partnered with Reynolds Funeral Home in Bracebridge was because of this cottage question, because they have so many folks who would like mom to be at the cottage. And so we're making planting kits available to families directly for that purpose. Very similar with if I want to be a tree when I die. There are few cemeteries right now in Canada who will do dedicated tree plantings per person, but I am working with a few early adopters. So that is really, really exciting. And I think that we're going to see quite a bit more of them in the next 5 years. I want to be with my dog is a really interesting question, because just last year, the Bereavement Authority of Ontario changed the provincial regulations so that any cemetery is allowed to have humans be buried with their pets. Each individual cemetery will have their own bylaws, however. So if that cemetery specifically chooses, well, we don't want to do that, it'll be in their bylaws. But any cemetery is allowed. So hopefully no more having to sneak each other to be with our soulmates forever. Hopefully that can be openly recognized and honored moving forward. If you already have a family plot and it's important to you to stay in that family plot, like you've got multiple generations of family members there, best thing to do is just call that cemetery and say, we have a family plot, but I'm looking for a green option. How can we either choose a full body greener burial in the family plot, or how can we have a cremation or aquamation option that's like in a garden right nearby the family plot? So asking these questions as a starting point is really important to know what's available for you, but also because of advocacy. A lot of cemeteries that I work with started because a community member reached out to me and said, I'm in this part of Quebec. None of my cemeteries offer this. Can you reach out to them for me? And I do. So use your voice, advocate for yourself, ask the questions that you really want to ask. And these folks in these professions are really, generally speaking, very wonderful. So they will want to help you.
Thank you so much. Over to you, Andy.
All right. Well, I just really want to thank both of our speakers. I mean, just absolutely wonderful presentations today. Thoroughly enjoy it. Again, we are going to have this tied up. We will have it on our website. I understand that Rogers TV is going to also be rebroadcasting this, so you can look to them for that. And then again, make sure that you go and take a look at our new website. It is on there. We have all 12 of our actions on there. You'll see under Invest in Green, you will probably see a lot of the content that's here today will be in that tab, as well as learn more about what we're doing, including volunteer opportunities. If you want to get involved in any of the events we have coming up, come get your trees in the ground, and we look forward to putting out as much content as we can to making sure that everyone is able to live green and ideally die green.